Well, it was a great honor for me to write one introduction to Voltaire, Bastards, and also a little introduction to unconscious civilization. But I think that this book on equilibrium, is, in my opinion, like a summa of John Ralston Saul ideas and John Ralston Saul's opinion about some important topics. Because the idea of the transition from corporatism to democracy, in my opinion, is inside us. It is directly in our minds. And this is, I suppose, the real program of this book. You know that John Ralston Saul starts with common sense, ethics, imagination, intuition, memory, and last but not least, reason and normal behavior. Is not one linear order, I think. It's just a sort of cooperation among some faculties of us. But I like to stress your attention on the first, common sense, and on the last, reason. Why about common sense? Is also for one personal reason. I am one old reader of Tom Paine, and I like very much the quotation of common sense from Tom Paine, and the idea that common sense is not only one common feeling, but is humanity, sensibility, sensus communis, one form of recognizing the author, and the idea of the author in confrontation with my own ideas. And from the other part, the other side, we have reason and normal behavior. Well, I think that the interesting thing is the polemics, the struggle of John Ralston Saul against the standard distinction between one theoretical reason, one pure reason in Kantian terms from one part, and the other side, the instrumental reason, means and ends. And I think that John Ralston is very correct to, is attacking this distinction. I suppose that this distinction is not a good distinction also in the context of actual sciences. Take, for example, rational decision making. In rational decision making, you have one side about means and ends, utility function, but the distribution of probability is coming from our background knowledge, our feelings, our beliefs, also our passions. Well, the different faculties cooperate also in one standard recipe of the so-called instrumental reason, for example, decision making. Or, for another example, I suppose in an example that John liked much, is the example of physical law. You have physical law, general, deterministic, in principle. For example, planets move around in regular orbits, but you need some perturbations to have a new discovery. For example, discover one more planet, Neptune, and so on. Well, we have to cooperate in this level, in science, in practical reason, rational and I think this is a great lesson coming from either mathematics, from physics, from biology too. It's very important in my opinion. But I have one more general question to John Ralston Saul, because the book ends with the story of two different cities as a typical example. Take, for example, one city coming from Dixieland, Richmond, for example, in Virginia, or Montgomery, Alabama, and so on, is a story, is a sad story. War, civil war, the war between the states, and destruction, and the so-called reconstruction after Abraham Lincoln's death. It's a very sad story. But this sad story is a consequence of a compromise in the Constitution 1 century ago, when people like Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin agreed on the Constitution. It was a very important agreement, but it was also agreement about slavery, or about one very ambiguous idea of people in the articles of Reform Bill and so on. This is a story. It's a story of one compromise. It was not a good equilibrium, I suppose, not so good in time. Another story is a story very interesting, coming from Thucydides. Athens, Thucydides from Athens, Peloponnesian War, from Athens and Sparta. Sparta is strong, is the instrumental reason against theoretical pure reason of Athens. But after the war, it was not a war between the states, but between the cities, very like states in ancient Greece. You have one situation of revival of democracy in Athens, one restoration of democracy in this city, without destruction, reconstruction, intercommon, and so on, but a very good, important city with men like philosophers, like, for example, Plato or Aristotle. Is a good equilibrium, this one. I have just two little questions I end. First, it's okay, it's correct, but which happens, which is the problem when the equilibrium is not so stable? Take, for example, this cover. You have a splendid cover from Magritte. You have equilibrium, one great apple and the head of a man. It's very good. It's very Newtonian idea. But we have also the possibility of collapsing of the apple, the great apple, on the head of the man. Sometimes it happens. It happens in cosmology sometimes, it happens in the planetary system, it happens also in civilization. And for the example of Athens, it was very good. But I remember the story of a very little man making questions to people called Socrates. It was processed and condemned to death, not from the Spartan elite, but from democracy. And my problem with equilibrium is some problem of stability of equilibrium, and the transition from one state of equilibrium to another, if it's possible. If it's possible without blood, without the death of Socrates, also in the great democratic Athens after the war. I apologize for my English because I have learned not a scholar, not a student, but I worked in men some times ago in Tiger Bank Belfast. Not a